Welcome to another episode of Talking Kotlin, everybody. It's good to be back. And who's also back is Hadi.
Hi, Seb. I don't feel so good today. I got to tell you.
Why is that, Hadi?
I hit my head on the kitchen counter. I threw a treat for my dog, the little one, and it went under the kitchen counter, not kitchen, well, the cupboard. And I went to take it out for her because she was destroying the cupboard. And when I came up, I smashed my head, and that was literally like 5-6 minutes ago. So, yeah, okay. If I suddenly pass out, just
call an ambulance.
No, continue recording. No, continue recording.
The show must go on.
The show must go on. Yeah,
that's right.
Don't worry about me. So how you been? Have you hit your head lately?
No, no. I know it's hard to believe, but that's just how I am.
Okay. You know what you need to do now? You need to get some dogs. You need to get some dogs.
Yeah.
And then
your new dog seems to be quite the rascal.
Don't even go there.
Yeah, causing a lot of menace.
Yeah, okay. I know. Just don't. And weather is nice here. It's kind of sunny. Yeah. So we'll get that over and done with. And how's the weather where you are, Seth?
The weather is foggy and very mediocre. So I can't wait to actually talk about some Kotlin to distract me from all of that. So who do we have on the show today, Hadi?
Yeah, absolutely. And before we get started, I want to thank our sponsors, which are the plastic little things so these are to unscrew taps, right? Back in the old days, you used to take like a wrench. Now you have to buy these little plastic things. So thank you to our tap unscrewer sponsors for this episode on Talking Kotlin. And yes, going to our guests. Today we have 2 guests with us, which is always fun, isn't it, Seb?
No, it's great. It's wonderful.
It is great, yes. I wasn't being sarcastic there. It's like,
no one can ever tell, but sure.
Show some emotion, Seb. Anyway, yes, our guests. We have Catalin and we have Raresh with us from Adobe. Welcome, folks. How are you doing?
Nice to be here, folks. Yeah. Should I start talking about...
No. All we want to know is just a hello. Okay, and that was today's episode, so see you next time.
So here's a fun little story about me and Adobe. So I come from Germany, and you know how middle schoolers they work on the school PCs with all the an old version of Adobe products, and I don't think I've ever heard as many different pronunciations of a company name than I have for Adobe. I've heard people say Adobe. I've heard people say Adobe, and of course Adobe. So, and I think it took me until I was 17 till I realized that's how you pronounce it correctly.
Yeah, that's fine. To be honest, Seb, even people in employees of Adobe here in Romania actually say Adobe from time to time.
They probably speak French, and they probably believe that's an E mute, because, that's what French is all about, throwing some letters that you don't pronounce.
It kind of reminds me of the whole Delphi and Delphi wars we used to have back in the old days. People said, on one side of the Atlantic, they used to call it Delphi, and on the other side, it was Delphi.
Huh.
So, yeah, there you go. But cool. So you're both based in Romania?
Correct.
Whereabouts in Romania?
Bucharest.
The
capital city, yeah.
I was there a few months ago. It was a wonderful trip from the airport to the hotel and back. It was beautiful.
I bet.
Beautiful.
I bet. Light traffic, really fast.
Really
nice
fast.
scenery around. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to mention the weather. But
come to Romania, come to Bucharest. It's very nice.
I don't want to mention the weather, but it was raining. So yeah, there you go.
Okay, you can see it behind me now. It's actually very nice weather here. Unusually
actually,
nice.
Behind you, I can see a mirror in which I can then see a reflection of some window where I see trees. But it looks like nice weather. Yeah. There is light. There is light at the end of the trees. Right. Did you get that? No, never mind. Okay, so before we go on, each of you, a little intro about yourselves, what positions you hold, what you do at Adobe or Adobe or Adobe.
I can start, Raresh, if you don't mind. So I'm Catalin. I'm actually a group manager at Adobe, where I currently manage several teams, all of them dealing with server-side, data-intensive applications, high throughput, low latency applications, streaming processing kind of stuff, and that sort of jazz.
And I'm Raresh. I'm with Adobe, I believe, for 8 years now. And much of this time I've been working on with Catalin building the data collection infrastructure for some Adobe products. And more recently, in the last 3 years or so, we've been working together to build the next generation Adobe Edge data collection for the marketing products of Adobe.
Could you just maybe tell for our listeners what the marketing products from Adobe are?
Yeah, that's probably the unknown side of Adobe because everybody knows about the creative stuff for Photoshop. Probably everybody has an unlicensed or used to have because right now you can't anymore. So Adobe also has a big business in marketing, digital marketing. So that means analytics, personalization, targeting, all that kind of stuff. So these require huge deployments. We have application deployed globally, presence in more than 8 or 9 regions around the globe. Huge deployments processing billions of events per day. I mean, the biggest one where we usually hit in the late season each year when it's Black Friday and Christmas and everything. 70 billion was the latest high mark for the day in one of our services. So,
wow.
So basically, yeah, you can think of it like this. Every company out there who has an application also needs a way to understand how much of their visitors are returning back in 5 days. And to ask that question and to give an answer, there has to be some data collection and infrastructure put in place to collect that data and be able to then query it and get insights from it at a very high scale. So that's the platform we are building or working on deals with that kind of problem.
Okay, and so I guess this was kind of born out of your own need, and you're now providing these services to others, right?
10 years ago, yeah, Adobe.com did that for internal purposes, but then that internal problem, it became apparent it's actually a very general problem to solve. And Adobe invested a lot in providing this for a whole set of customers. Many of them you probably have heard of, but I'm not going to mention here.
Nice. Okay. So just for a little bit of context before we dive into the technical side, how big is Adobe as a company in like the engineering parts especially?
So I'll say orders of magnitude, just not to refer to specific numbers, although I think you can find that on Glassdoor or something like that. It's going to be tens of thousands of engineers in the R&D, let's say, portion of the company. Currently, our business unit, for example, has currently something like more than 1,000 engineers involved only in this platform side of things.
Yeah, the reason we're asking this to give some context is because obviously most of us assume that Adobe is a large company, right? And the challenge that has always been from our users has been, how do I introduce a technology like Kotlin in a large company? So that's the context, right? So it's not a little shop in Bucharest with 15 people, okay, people? Adobe is a little bit larger than that by orders of magnitude.
Yeah,
that's true.
Yeah, it is. And that's why we are here to talk exactly about this problem, because it's not an easy problem, I would say, to go around in a larger enterprise.
I love that. I love that. I love hard problems. Yes. Tell us the horror stories. Let's go.
And to be honest, Harry, actually this becomes, in my mind, to be a problem when you go past 100 people or 500 people. You don't have to be 10,000 people to have this problem. In places where you go more than 10 or 20 teams, introducing new technology starts to become a challenge.
So then here comes the obvious question. How did you do it?
I think the shortest answer to this is slowly, which is probably not what folks who like to use Kotlin in an enterprise tomorrow would like to hear, but it's the reality. I'll talk about my experience with it, and then I'll let Raresh go into the finer details. So a bit of history or a recap here. Both me and Raresh work in a group currently, and specifically this business unit we are part of and builds this platform. It's, I would say, 80% a JVM shop, where Java and Scala, for good reasons, are the accepted languages. Java because, okay, it's probably a good choice for as an enterprise language, and Scala because it had all the streaming processing momentum behind it a while back. And I had, let's say, the opportunity to work with teams that used both of these languages, and even a bit more than that, and kind of had an observing position where I saw the dynamics of these two different groups, like teams that were using Java, but were fighting, not fighting, because these are teams that enjoyed using Java. But when you look back at it, it's Java plus some annotation processors to go around some limitations of the language. Everybody knows about Immutable or Lombok or that sort of frameworks. And then maybe some RxJava or Reactor thrown in there for good measure for asynchronous processing pipelines. And end of the day, you're looking at a project which is not that, which is Java, but has a lot of external frameworks and tools added to it, so that it's a bit better than what standard Java is, right?
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, on the other side, I had teams with Scala. I also a big promoter of Scala at the time. Started from personal experience. Like the language a lot, and it's something I'm going to say something that everybody knows already. Learning curve for Scala is high. I don't think that's something that people debate anymore. It's a powerful language and a beautiful language at that, but it has a high entry bar to add into it. And between at that moment, this was, I don't know, how many years ago was this? Like
Probably 5 or 6 years ago, I think.
Yeah, something like that. So a long time ago, in relative terms, I saw Kotlin at some point. I was watching JetBrains newsletters and so on. I don't even know if it was 1.0 at the time. It was close to, I guess. And just I never thought of introducing it as a language in any of my teams. That thought didn't cross my mind at all. But I started using it for some personal projects, and what I realized in 2 weeks, between being relatively decent with Scala and having experience with Java, is that Kotlin felt very natural. And I don't know what I think it's hard for me right now to put a finger on what. How you can quantify the language feels natural for you. I would say that maybe the filter not null method helped in the standard library, or that sort of pragmatism that Kotlin added instantly. But I started kind of in different team meetings with Raresh and other folks, bring it up that here I play with this language and I find it really cool. And I didn't do anything less, by the way, at the time.
And we were still considering you crazy at that time, Catalin. I mean, I'll be fair with you. I mean, I was a non-believer, I have to admit, because I was, everybody, probably everybody has its past mistakes.
Okay, so take us. Let's examine Catalin's mistakes. Why were you a non-believer? What was pushing you away from it?
I was frankly believing at that time that Scala momentum in our org is just too big, and focusing on something else is just a waste of effort. I was probably ignoring the fact that now, if I look back at it, I remember how it was the ramp up that Catalin was talking about in Scala. Pretty much everybody had to start with functional programming in Scala, the famous and very good course that Martin Odersky has on Coursera. But practically that was the bar we kind of had internally. It was hard for people to get up and running in Scala projects. It was a big difference in the way you have to think about writing code, or the way you write it. It is functional programming first, and whereas in Kotlin, I believe Kotlin takes you as you are. If you like imperative, because that's how you mentally structure pretty much everything, then here you go. You can be very fast and very fast productive in Kotlin. Whereas in Scala, you struggle all the time to say, how can I be if proficient? Do I have to always write functional programming to adhere to the language structures, or But I didn't see that at that time. I'll be fair. I mean, I was still believing that Catalin is wasting his time until I tried it myself, and I've enjoyed so much. Then after that, I probably started to bring some more people in this story.
Okay, so let me take a step back a second. You had Java with a hodgepodge of different libraries and different things, as you mentioned, to kind of make Java not Java, right? And that was the incentive for you to look at Scala and try and introduce Scala, right? Is that correct?
Not necessarily. We also had Scala in parallel for other reasons, right? Scala was there for stream processes or big data processing done with Spark. It was the natural choice there. Okay. And there were two categories of people, I would say, to your point. People who used this hodgepodge of Java frameworks and looked at Scala and said, this is our solution. And people who said, I invested 10 years of my career in Java. I don't care about that different paradigm, right? That's out there.
So that's where I was trying to get to, which is if you had a bunch of people that you kind of took from the category of I don't want to try anything new and put them into the Scala category, and then a couple of years down the line you're like, well, maybe this isn't the best thing. Let's try Kotlin. Did you start to get some pushback of like, we should have just stuck to Java and not go through this mess? Because first you tell me Scala, now you're saying Kotlin. Did you suffer any of that?
Yeah. So maybe, though I would say, and Raresh hinted on this, I was in no position to push for things. Maybe this sounds strange for me, coming from I am the group manager here, but I have, I think, zero power to dictate technology in this group, and that has to come more from senior people like Raresh in the team and so on. And that, I think, was Raresh was the one who actually took the language from a personal pet passion of mine to something with it.
I mean, to be clear, when I say push, I don't mean force people. I mean kind of advocate for it and persuade people and that, right?
Yeah. And We got a bit of pushback in both transitions. People moving from Java to Scala, and some of them saying or asking questions around and being in a way realistic about it. It takes me a long time to get proficient with this. Do we really need it? Because, for example, we also have a Java API for Spark, right? And people actually, the other way around, people moving from Scala to Kotlin, you have Raresh here who can, because he did all of that, who can talk about that part.
I probably tried them all, but I never been the most involved I've ever been was the with Kotlin. I mean, I remember we have a nice thing in Adobe. I'm sure maybe other companies have it. The ones that don't have it, they should copy it. We call it a garage week, twice a year or even maybe more. It's an entire week where you can build stuff and try new things. And I remember one of the failed garage weeks. We were trying a few more folks to do something with Scala, and it didn't work out. I mean, we spent half of the time to just get our stuff together. Whereas the second time around, when we tried something with Kotlin, the experience was a lot different. I mean, it felt natural, as Catalin was saying. We actually won that garage week. I mean, we had the project was fun. I'm not sure if Kotlin directly contributed to that, but maybe it did, because we were able to cover so much and faster. And that probably was the thing that caught me. And I frankly became an advocate for this. It was Garage Week initially with a few folks around me, and then I had to take the crazy step on doing it on a mission critical project. Anybody has to do that, I believe, at some point. I was encouraged by the fact that we were due to do a POC to present to folks, and it literally I was able to use Ktor at that time, looking for fun frameworks, and I enjoyed it a lot on how fast you can prototype something with it. I still remember the people's reaction in the room while showing them the prototype. One of the guys said, "This is the most beautiful JSON I've ever seen." Everybody knows that JSON is not beautiful, but the fact that they showed the thing up and running so quickly, that was impressive. And I believe, again, it was Kotlin, it was Ktor. There were things that contributed to that, for sure.
So when you say you built a proof of concept there, does it mean that your first line of Kotlin code that went into production, was that a completely separate service, or did you kind of like sneak that in as a part of a larger system? How did that work?
This was a new project, so we sneaked it in the main project that was about to go to production. That was the bold move, or crazy, or.
But actually, I think, Seb, you have a great point there, because it maybe hints to some recommendation we're going to have at the end. How do you start with this, right? Do you start with your mission critical project, write your first line in code and push it? That's surely not it, because when I would say, Raresh, keep me honest here, but by the time you did the POC for our Edge network, we're talking about a span of 2 years of Raresh and team building like tooling, small projects, CLIs, test frameworks using Kotlin. So it's not, I think, probably nobody will say, no matter the size of the company, to go with a new language and try it in production, see how it works.
Yes.
that's granted.
Surprisingly, many people have actually, but yeah.
Probably, yeah. Maybe we can talk about that afterwards, because even production is a whole other set of challenges there, that even when you think you are proficient with a technology, it can surprise you a bit as well.
Yeah, you're right. It was not. We were not that crazy. I was simplifying things, but the point is that once you experiment for a while, it probably requires someone to take such a, I don't know, bold decision and promote it a little further. And frankly, we struggle. I mean, wasn't maybe we'll get to this anyways. I mean, I have lots of good words to say about Kotlin and our experience for sure. But initially, we had our bumpy road. I wouldn't say it was that critical or something that blocked us a lot, but I mean, I'm talking about maybe 3 years ago. Tooling was less efficient. Debugging, I still remember folks with in our asynchronous application with Ktor doing debugging, and all of a sudden they say the debugger doesn't stop. We are joking around. Maybe the debugger suspended themselves as well. I mean, you were probably in a suspending
Ouch.
function, so that that happened. That happened.
I heard music to my ears. I heard the word Ktor. We got to touch on Ktor. So yeah, I'm making notes about the Ktor thing. Yes.
Yeah,
I know. Ktor, I still love it. I mean, and I'm not the only one. It was such a good fit for our project then, because it's so modular in itself, and our application had to be modular. And I will be honest, we borrowed much of Ktor to build our own business logic. And what that went so great, and the end result is extensible and very very easy to maintain and decoupled and whatnot. We like it a lot. Also, yeah.
No, I was going to say let's get an overview of, like, because you've talked about an application that processes 70 billion events, right? But we haven't really, discussed what type of applications you are actually creating at Adobe, because we're assuming they're all server side, right? But what are they? Like, what technologies, what frameworks are they using under the covers?
Yeah. Okay. So for let's keep it in basically to the level of our group, I would say, because there are teams out there who build mobile applications with Android and Kotlin, but
we don't care about mobile.
For us, specifically, it is these are server-side applications that do some data processing. I'll talk about two services here because one of them Raresh touched on is the POC, was the POC that 2 years later is now the production service. And the other, which is maybe similarly interesting, I would say, is I almost said legacy application. It's not legacy. It's an application that was built with Java and Jetty, and went through some serious transformations in 6 years, getting to RxJava, asynchronous Jetty, and then in the past 2 years, even moved the asynchronous processing part to, or many parts of the system to Kotlin and coroutines. And we have both sides of the story here. I would say it's the old application that was migrated to coroutines, and maybe we can talk about the benefits we saw out of that. And we have the new application that we built, that Raresh and his team built from scratch using Ktor and Kotlin from the get-go and coroutines.
Okay.
And those were...
Sorry, just a short little question so that maybe our listeners also get the context. When you talked about the 70 billion events processing project or service, which one of those is that?
You can guess. I would say is the Java one that got migrated, which makes it in a way an even more interesting story, because all those changes that happen in an application that I think now has more than 9 years or 10 years, something like that, had to come also with a lot of care about how do you roll those changes to production in a safe way. How do you do performance and cost analysis and all that stuff.
Makes sense. So I'm sure that Hadi has a couple of follow-up questions that kind of prod into the details a little more, but just so that I can kind of see the road ahead of where we're going. At this moment, where is that service? Is it fully Kotlin? Is it Kotlin and a mix of other things? Where is it standing?
And what frameworks?
One is not using Ktor. I will disappoint you there. We chose Vertex. I can't remember.
I'm super sorry, but Hadi already saw the headline for this episode: 70 billion events in Ktor. He already saw it. You've crushed his dreams.
No, Harry, there's a silver lining here.
Phone call. I gotta go. I'm not interested anymore.
The new application we were talking about using Ktor, that is expected to handle more than 100 billion calls per day.
There you go, baby. There you go.
But it's not
because
currently.
Maybe for context, what Raresh is building right now, the edge data collection layer, has multiple components, but one of the components that he talks about, the Kotlin one with Ktor, is actually a server-side aggregation framework, a service that sits on top of all these other older data collection layers and kind of unifies it. It's not GraphQL, but it's the same concept, right? Getting data or sending data, dispatching into multiple downstream systems asynchronously and getting it back, composing it to a single view for the client. So that's why at the end, this application, when we roll out gradually to all customers, is going to cover the combined traffic of Adobe, which is currently more than 100 billion calls per day.
Okay, so I'm just composing the tweet from Ktor right now. Is it?
Okay, so I apologize for the interruption. I just really had to make that comment. You said, Raresh, that you chose Vertex. Do continue.
Yeah, we chose Vertex, and frankly, I believe one of the reasons we chose it. I mean, we were at the beginning with Ktor as well, but from our early testing back then, I remember how one thing nice about Ktor is that you have many options and everything is pluggable. You have 3 or 4 HTTP clients out of the box, and finding a performant one was critical for us. So we tried them all, and in the end, we discovered that building one on top of Vertex actually, and then plugging it into Ktor was the best option for us because it was fully asynchronous. The others, I mean, depending on the option, HTTP, you have Apache as well.
Yeah,
some of them
a lot.
have a more of a traditional non-event driven way of handling HTTP calls. So it hits a bit your throughput. So working on that thought, we said, let's try Vertex end-to-end on this project. I'll be honest, I mean, that was a bumpy road because with Ktor, we already knew a lot of things. And we faced some challenges with Vertex on the HTTP front. So although the HTTP client was great, on the web framework itself, we struggled with, I mean, at some point, I remember we enabled some monitoring or instrumentation, and that took 20% of our throughput. And why? Because it was using a lock for metrics. And we were like, what's going on here? I mean, things you wouldn't expect. You probably have these even in old and mature frameworks. But again, to sum up, we said this is a huge production project. We'll probably have a hard time to be running it only with new and shiny things. Let's see if we can bring coroutines and Kotlin alongside with a more established framework as a combination to convince people that we're doing good business here.
Part of it was also to answer Seb's question initially, is that this project was and still is a mix of Kotlin and Java. It's not it was not a full rewrite. We wouldn't embark on that. I think Raresh and team had the right approach there, where instead of proposing a rewrite, which probably even I would have said no to, they proposed wrapping up the critical part of the dispatching of calls and receiving of calls into Kotlin and coroutines, and leaving the other part of the domain, let's say, untouched, the business logic in Java and stuff like that.
And how did the adoption of coroutines kind of go for you? Because I know that there's quite a paradigm shift between writing reactive applications and then going to kind of the more imperative approach that coroutine gives, but that obviously comes with its own challenges. How did that go?
That is a good question. Because I'll be honest, there were many things where we struggled with Reactor and with Java. I mean, just having consistent logging, such a small thing, MDC everywhere. That is such an afterthought in that framework that is hard to get. And then I know this is something that annoys Roman Elizarov whenever he hears it. In Kotlin, by contrast, you just write suspend to a function, and all of a sudden it's asynchronous, and all your problems go away. No, that's far from being true. But the other aspect is that you don't have to learn about everything to the depth of coroutines from get-go. I remember we were working with Ktor, and there's a famous component there, suspend function gun, at the heart of Ktor. And we said, you know what? For coroutines, you probably you're a beginner, or you know how to write suspend function gun. That was our scale, frankly. It was daunting looking at it. I mean, but that's something that is when you go into the guts of the API, you have to know in and out of the coroutines API. Just writing efficient code, asynchronous code with Kotlin and coroutines and structured programming. I mean, that is structured concurrency. That is the thing that I feel helps a lot and helped a lot. I mean, okay, you still have to understand what is supervising control. Why is this thing hanging? Why isn't going away? What do I have to do to close things up? You learn by doing, though, and with the much improved debugger right now, you can see things that are still hanging, and probably you can guess why they are hanging. And a stack trace still makes more sense, though, in coroutines and in the IntelliJ at least, than it does for Reactor, or than it did for Reactor 3 years ago. I remember those, looking at those, and then whatever. It's not us. It's something there. Yeah. So how would I sum it up? I mean, I feel you get a sense of doing things very easily with coroutines, but the reality is that once you solve more and more complex issues, you have to go and look into things like how a dispatcher maybe works. How is it the threads being used for I/O or non-I/O context, and how much do I get on context switch maybe, and why do I get it, and stuff like that.
No, Raresh, I would say that's true for any framework out there.
Yeah,
and
it's true.
This is actually, because you touched on this, I want to say this. Understanding how things work internally, a big thing. Once you go over a certain threshold with your application and try to understand deeply how it behaves, you go to get that point. I think part of our case when we did the Kotlin adoption case in Adobe, part of it was this comparison between, or a section of the case was comparing Scala and Kotlin, and why would you use each. But there was a section there that Raresh and I identified at the time, was the implementation of the map function. And it was basically map function in Kotlin iterable map, you look at it, everybody can read it and understand what it does. Then you go to the implementation in Scala, and it's probably something that creators of the language understand really well, but many people don't. And I actually tried this. I went with the map implementation and went to the people who are really proficient in Scala and asked to see what happens there. And it was a lot at the time, because we're talking in Scala 2.11. That changed meanwhile. It was a lot to understand. I would say it was impossible to understand. So maybe that is actually part of the Kotlin appeal for us as well, is that when you need to go deeper into the language, you're still in familiar, advanced but familiar territory. You're not crossing a threshold.
Except for a suspend function gun, but that's a different story. No,
I have a question though, because so obviously anything that you learn to how it works under the covers, you're going to get more insight and understand better. But the question is the ramp up time to go with coroutines and to get the, I don't know, let's say 80% of the job done. Do you still find that is true? And do you find that the code and the things that people have written during this 80% is not wasted when you need to go to that, I don't know, 20% and look under the covers and fine tune things? Am I making myself clear with what I'm trying to ask?
Yes.
Okay.
I still consider the biggest win for us to be asynchronous programming with coroutines. I mean, frankly, if it wasn't that story, it would be hard. Just talking about sugar syntax and data classes and removing immutables and non-bulk, that probably doesn't convince many people. But frankly, we did internal talks, tech talks, and we showed to people, here is one of our applications. It's using Reactor, and try to make a sense of this business logic, because it was pretty much impossible to do. And then we live written it wrote it in Kotlin and coroutines, and they were shocked about how easy it is to bring Kotlin to a project. I'm not sure why people thought that it was a difficult task. They were like, okay, that's quite easy. Then they could actually follow and read and understand what that application is doing. There's no ceremony around it, or that much ceremony, and that is a huge advantage. I mean, I will still pay the cost of digging through the details on that 20% of the time, as you said, to have this benefit of maintainability and easier ramp up for new people, and be productive easier on an application. Let's be fair, on a complex application, because any asynchronous application is more complex than a traditional one in many ways.
So unfortunately, we are running out of time for this episode. So I do want to wrap up, but I want to ask one more big picture question, and that is, what does Kotlin at Adobe look like today? We've kind of figured that part out, I think, pretty well, at least for your team. But also, what does Kotlin at Adobe look like tomorrow? And especially also in regards to, are you trying to push the things that you've learned here to other teams and kind of advocate a little bit more? How's that looking?
Yeah, unfortunately, we talked only about the history part of things, but the reality is 2 years ago, we actually went through a standard process in Adobe to introduce new technology that has to be approved by different architects in different groups. The process tries to be as objective as possible, although it's hard. And whenever you go through that process, and we went with Kotlin, it's a catch-22 problem most of the time, because one of the things you have to show there is usage and experience using it and the benefits of the technology you're introducing it. But in order to use the technology at scale, you have to get approval for the technology. You see what's the challenge there, right? So we had, but we were fortunate that we had this experience in isolation a bit with a few teams trying it out, having use out of it at large scale for specific problems like that rewrite of the big service, that enhancement of the big service we had. And when we went there, we actually went with 20 people or so already using it, with a big service seeing a lot of cost benefits, because when you talk 70 billion calls per day, you also talk a lot of money being spent for that service to be distributed globally. And we showed some interesting numbers there, at 25% improvement at the time. Part of that case, we talked about this subjective feedback we had from my teams, because I had a teams Java, Scala, Kotlin, and having feedback from people who went through all of it and said Kotlin is a better choice was good. But I think in that case, what hit most for people and why Kotlin was adopted as an incubation language, the status that it is in now, was the interop story with Java. Because it's if you think about it, it's hard for an enterprise when you propose new technology. You don't think about syntax sugar, how easy it is to write code, and so on. You actually think about, do I have quality checks, tooling in place? Does the runtime is well integrated, telemetry for this, and so on? And for us, a big sell was, well, you have it for Java, you have most of it for Kotlin as well. Build tooling integration and all that stuff comes for almost for free. You can adopt it incrementally. A big sell. It's not you have to do a leap. It's actually a small step for you to take. And that was actually once we went through that process, and as I said, many folks didn't even knew that you can add Kotlin to a Java project by just adding a few lines in a build file. That was something that people didn't quite get initially, but we went through that process with a long case describing all of this stuff, and it was an easier sell. Probably if Kotlin didn't have that story, it wouldn't have passed the threshold, because otherwise people were inclined to say, for good reason, what can I do in Kotlin and I cannot do in Scala, right? And that's for Java, for that matter.
So essentially right now, what you're saying is that Kotlin is an approved technology at Adobe and you can roll it out, no questions asked, pretty much, which is really cool.
It's Kotlin's an approved language in an incubation phase. There are a few, let me explain a bit. Incubation means that, because you asked what comes next, means that after 2 years, we can probably go and say, okay, let's promote this to the standard set of technologies. It's incubation because we did have some challenges back then that were still unanswered. Is Kotlin, for example, integrated with our code coverage analysis tools or our quality gates, static checks? The answer was, well, it's not, because those tools don't support yet Kotlin. So it was there was a bit of a pushback from this perspective that think about a company who wants to see inventory of all their services and get data from what those services are doing in the entire software lifecycle. You want to have perfect tooling there, or close to perfect tooling for all that stuff. And Kotlin was 80% there, I would say, and it gets better and better. And the other thing is that at the time we were 20 people. I would say this number actually grew a lot, because we were 20 people in a specific group, and now Kotlin actually expanded to many other groups. And to answer your question, you still have to check back with your director of engineering to see if it's an approved technology. But we already gained so much popularity that I think that's an easy threshold if you are willing to try it out.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, I assume that if you have already stuff in production and you're putting other stuff that you're working on, hoping for production, because if you have 100 billion requests in a test environment, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I'm assuming that it's not that hard to get Kotlin into production now at Adobe, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Cool.
Actually, currently Kotlin is used by many other teams besides our group, teams that do anything from compliance work to I don't know, server-side applications that manage configurations for our systems.
And mobile.
And mobile, for sure.
And
mobile. Yeah.
Cool. Well, that's it. We're out of time. So thank you both for joining us. I'm really happy. This was wonderful because, you know, it's music to my ears. It's not only Kotlin, it's also Ktor. It's just the whole package. Even having smashed my head on the kitchen counter an hour ago has just disappeared. You see? And they say placebo doesn't work. Of course it does.
All right. Yeah, so thank you so much for coming on the show. We really appreciate you being here. I think we've learned a lot. I think our listeners have also learned a lot, and our viewers have also learned a lot. Yeah, so thank you so much. And to everyone back at home, we say thanks for tuning in. And hopefully we'll see you in a future episode.
And don't forget to subscribe because they make us say this. If we don't, they get angry. Hit the bell and hit that like. Yeah. Until next time, folks.
Bye-bye.